Hello, this is the SpreadJS 14.1 New Features webinar. My name is Kevin Ashley, and today I'll be going over the great new features that we added in this release and how they can improve your application. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat window, and we will go over them at the end of the presentation. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. All right, let's get started. So I wanted to get you a bit of info about myself. I'm the product manager for SpreadJS, and I've been working on the Grape City team for a little over 6 years now. I graduated from North Carolina State University with a bachelor's degree in computer science and a concentration in game design. Also joining us for this presentation is Mackenzie, who is a part of our SpreadJS support team. She can help with answering any questions that you might have in the chat for this webinar and can help you with any spread issues you might have when you contact our support team. In this presentation, I'll be going over all of the new features that we added in 14.1, including the official release of pivot tables. To start off, we will go over the brand new pivot table add-on component, move on to enhancements we made to the calculation engine, such as the new web service function, chart enhancements, including new sparklines, shape enhancements, like the new shape hyperlinks, and finally workbook enhancements, like our brand new camera shape. Pivot tables are among the most useful Excel features, allowing users to swiftly summarize and analyze large quantities of data with a simple and intuitive UI. Our implementation of this includes the standard Excel pivot table features that you and your users are used to, including the pivot panel, sections, sorting and filtering, grouping, printing, saving views, and Excel.io compatibility. Pivot table in SpreadJS is an add-on component that, similar to SpreadJS, is licensed separately by hostname and is available as an additional add-on fee. This feature is available to try out in the SpreadJS trial and in our demos on our website. SpreadJS pivot tables support customization of the theme, styles, and their options. We support 85 predefined themes to choose from, and you can apply different styles to row and column fields within the pivot table. We also support pivot table options like banded rows and columns, header, filter, and tooltip visibility, and the position of grand totals and subtotals, just to name a few. There are also a couple of functions that we support, one of which is the get pivot data function, which queries the pivot table and returns specific data based on that structure. This means you can always get the correct data even if the pivot table layout was changed. You can also get the details of any selected area as a two-dimensional array with the get pivot details method. The SpreadJS 14.1 pivot tables can work with so many different use cases, including product sales, fintech, marketing, and budgeting applications. And now I'll show you a short demo using pivot tables. So as you can see right here, we have our standard pivot table, and we have the pivot table panel on the right side here. And just as you can expect, you can move these fields to different options, and it will change accordingly. You can also say views. So let's say, for example, I wanted this view right here. So I would go ahead, type that in, call it test, add that. And now, if I switch it and then try going back to that view, you'll see it'll load that view again. As part of our calculation enhancements, we added the web service function, which will return data from any web service and is simply written as web service with the URL as a parameter. In that function, URL is the location of the web service that will be called. This is also supported in Excel import and export and can be useful for keeping XML-based data from a website consistently updated within your spreadsheets. We have also updated the let function to match Excel implementation. This update means that period characters are no longer supported in the name for the function. For chart enhancements, we have added a few new sparklines to the 14.1 release. The first of which is a histogram, which is just a visual interpretation of numerical data separated into different bins. It also supports continuous and discrete histograms and can be set with a simple formula like our other sparklines. And now here's a little demo of histograms. So as you can see, as you would expect the sparkline, it's in a single cell. And if I double click, you can see that it's actually just a simple function with part of a cell range as one of its parameters. And you can change any of the options listed here. So you can see down here, we have all these options provided for that function. We have also enhanced our chart axis feature, so it now supports setting values in reverse. The second sparkline we have added is the new image sparkline. This new function essentially allows you to specify a URL to an image file as a parameter, and the result is an image displayed in the cell. There are also parameters for the function to specify scaling or to clip specific sections of the image. And this is what that sparkline looks like. So as you can see, each of these is actually just a sparkline function, which in this case references a cell in the S column. Right now, we've just made the width really small so you can't see it. But if I open it up, you can see that we actually have URLs for each of these images. Bar y-axis labels have also been enhanced to support word wrap. So if a label is too long to fit on the axis, an option can be set to automatically word wrap the labels. The last sparkline we have added in the 14.1 release is the gauge sparkline. This simple function lets you show values on a graduated scale or dial and is perfect for adding to dashboards with little effort required. So as you can see here, we have another sparkline, just a simple function. And you can edit all those different values. So let's say, for example, I want to make this value a little lower. I could do that. As you can see, it changes. You change the colors too if I wanted. So I want this to be orange. Could do that. And there's a lot of different options that you can set just with that simple function. We have also made a few enhancements to our shape implementation, the biggest of which is hyperlinks. These are supported in standard, group, and connector shapes. This can be useful for making things like navigation shapes for forms, as shown to the right, and is also supported for JSON serialization. So I'll show you a little demo showing that off. So right here, we have a standard workbook, and we have a few different shapes, which in this case are references to locations in the sheet or different sheets in the workbook. So if I click one of these, we'll actually go to that sheet in the workbook. Shapes now also support compound line types for their outline, which include simple, double, thick-thin, thin-thick, and triple line types, as shown in that screenshot to the right. We have also added snap to grid functionality so that you can more easily align shapes to the left, top, and right, as well as other elements in the workbook. Along with snap to grid, we implemented shape distribution, which lets you allocate spacing between selected shapes evenly, both in horizontal or vertical directions. This can help your users more easily space shapes correctly and with the proper alignment. So here's a little demo that shows that off. So right now you can see when I move the shape around, it's not bound to any grid. But if I turn the snap mode on to grid, you can see that it now snaps to the grid in the workbook. And we also have the alignment. So if I select multiple shapes and I change the alignment to center, you can see they all become center aligned on the horizontal axis. And then if I wanted to vertically distribute them, so I could make the spacing even between them all, I could set the vertical distribution. And this works for both horizontal and vertical. Shape filling has also been enhanced with gradient support, which can be either linear or radial, and is simply set using the gradient fill type property. You can see those gradients in the screenshot to the left. Another enhancement we've made to shapes is texture fill, which is essentially showing textures or pictures within shapes, as shown in the screenshot to the right. This also supports offset and scaling of the pictures to show them as patterns. Shapes also support both horizontal and vertical alignment. The last of the shape enhancements we made for this release is text edit. This new feature allows you to add and edit text within a shape, and it can be formatted with the standard text styles, including fill color, font, transparency, text direction, and text alignment. It also supports auto break and text wrapping. Now, this new functionality works with any sort of shape that you would implement in SpreadJS. So take this standard square, for example. If I were to double click on it, you'll see I get a text cursor. And if I went ahead and typed in a sentence, you can see that the text appears in the shape. Now I can edit and do whatever I want to the shape, and the text will change accordingly. With 14.1, we've also made enhancements to our standard workbook feature set. One of the biggest of these new features is camera shape. This essentially provides a dynamic snapshot of a cell range that reflects any changes that happen in the origin range. This can be really useful for showcasing different parts of data in a dashboard. It is also really easy to work with as it supports all the typical shape operations. You can also change the styling of the camera shape, including the background color, opacity, and border. And now here we have a camera shape implemented on this cell range right here. So as you can see, it's just a simple shape, and I can do anything I could do with a normal shape. It also responds to changes in the workbook data. So for example, I wanted to change this to 20, for example. You'll see that data is also changed in the camera shape. So this could be really useful, say if you have this data, elsewhere on the sheet, but you want it right front and center, you could just put a camera shape right here. And of course, it supports alignment. So you could, snap to grid and then align it to other shapes, stuff like that, and make designing workbooks and reports and dashboards really easy. This release also includes an update to the trailing row implementation. The placement can now be controlled. We have always supported frozen rows at the beginning and frozen rows at the end of a workbook. But with previous releases, this trailing row was always at the bottom of the SpreadJS instance. With this release, it can now be displayed right after the data without the white space between the two. So just to show you what I'm talking about, let's say this workbook right here has a frozen trailing row count of 1, and that would be this row right here, row 33. As you can see, this is how it was before this release by default. It always sticks to the edge no matter where the data is. But say I turn that option off. Now it sticks to the bottom of the data. However, when I scroll up, it stays on the bottom of the spread instance. Per customer request, we have also exposed the API for the undo and redo stack. This should help with managing memory consumption, giving developers full control over removing items from the undo and redo stack. The size of checkboxes and radio buttons can now be adjusted, regardless of font size. This can help these buttons fit in more stylistically with your spreadsheets and forms, and can be especially useful for touch devices. So here we have your standard checkbox. And right here, I can change the size, let's say 25. And now the checkbox button size is much bigger, but the text is still the same size. So this can be really useful if you have a touch device. You don't want the checkbox to be really tiny on the touch screen. With 14.1, date formatting can now be based on the locale settings of the web browser it is running in, meaning that dates can be formatted to your customer's browsers without having to add code for different locales. Another customer requested feature has been the ability to change the position of the sheet tabs. By default, sheet tabs are displayed at the bottom of the workbook like Excel, but you can now move them to the top, left, or right of the workbook to match whatever design you see fit. So here's the default tab strip location at the bottom of the workbook, but I can move it to the top, right, or left. And it still supports all the same features that it did, no matter what position it's in. We are constantly improving the user experience. And to that end, we have enhanced the undo functionality by including sections. Now, when an action is undone, previously selected cells will be reselected. And we have also enhanced our cell button functionality with a new option to customize the style when a cursor is hovered over them, as you can see in the GIF to the right. For 14.1, we have added support to disable the save warning messages. These are essentially the messages that show when you try to close a workbook with unsaved changes in the SpreadJS designer, as shown in the GIF to the left. See changes are made, and then that little dialog pops up. You can now disable that with this release. The last feature we added was an enhancement to our protection options to disable group features when the sheet is protected. Essentially, if a sheet is protected and has groups in it, the developer can specify an option to disable collapsing or expanding those groups. So as you can see, we have a protected sheet right here. I can't edit any of these cells, except for some of them, in this case, the ones that are gray. And right now, I can't operate the row or column outlines. But if I set that property to true, I can now expand and collapse those groups and rows. And that is done setting some simple options. So in this example, it's right here. Allow outline columns and allow outline rows. And that's just set on the sheet protection options. That concludes the SpreadJS 14.1 new features webinar. If there are any questions, please post them in the chat now, and we will go over them. Otherwise, feel free to submit feedback on this webinar using my email provided. If you have any sort of feature or component requests, please submit those using our support portal. And if you haven't already, you can download a trial of SpreadJS at www.grapecity.com/SpreadJS.
Hi, Kevin. One additional comment on, so the demos you were showing, those are all part of our live demos up on the website. So if people want to go explore what you've been seeing, those are currently live on the website for everything. That's the site you've been running. And for pivot table, you just showed the overview of the pivot table functionality, but there's an awful lot more. So I encourage everybody to go explore the functionality of that as well, which is, again, is live up on the grapecity.com website.
Yep,
and if there's
I only
any
went through a couple of demos. Got it.
Yeah, and if there's any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat window. We'll give you a couple minutes.
And yeah, there are only a couple of demos that I went through, but we have a whole lot on here. And these are all live on our website right now.
Okay, I am not seeing any questions, so I guess you did a great job, Kevin. Thank you. And moving forward, if anybody does have questions, feel free to email Kevin directly at kevin.ashley@grapecity.com or send it to our general address is us.sales@grapecity.com. And we'll be following up. There'll be a follow-up recording. This will be sent out for those that couldn't make it, as well as we'll send out the copy of the PowerPoint slide deck.
Oh, I also see one question. Any limits to the number of rows? No, there are not. There are no limits to the number of rows in the SpreadJS workbook. It sort of entirely depends on how much data you're loading. Obviously, we're limited by the memory in the web browser. But as for SpreadJS itself, there's not really any limit, any hard limit, I should say.
Any other questions?
Performance for pivot table. It's pretty fast, I would say, working with it. I don't really have a benchmark on hand for that, but I would say that any number of rows of data that you could think of can probably be done without any performance hindrance in SpreadJS. Again, it kind of just depends on the browser memory limitation.
Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Yep. Thank you for joining the webinar. Have a great day.